Alright, everyone, let's talk about the whole situation with The Last of Us 2 not having any multiplayer. I'm not angry, I'm not pissed off. There are plenty of people who have made videos about how pissed off they are and throwing a whole temper tantrum. I'm just disappointed, honestly, more than anything else. Just kind of sad. That's really where I'm at right now when it comes to these things that happen in video games. I just come to expect mediocrity. So when it actually happens, it's more like, okay, it sucks because I was really looking forward to this. I was really looking forward to The Last of Us 2 having single player, a great single player experience as we saw from the first one, even better. Great. But also, I honestly, most of the amazing experiences I've had with The Last of Us have to do with the multiplayer. Now, why is that? Okay, as amazing as the single player was, it only lasts you so long. And this is something that people do not seem to understand because you have a lot of people who have no problem throwing down $60 on all these single player only games. You know, these games that are oriented on a linear single player experiences that can last you, some of them only last a few hours. In the case of The Last of Us, and I'm sure The Last of Us 2 is not going to be much longer, probably around 20 hours, 25 hours. That's probably the most you're going to get out of the campaign. And a lot of people have been celebrating these linear single player games about how amazing it is that Sony's focusing so much on single player and how their multiplayer is not important. If they skip multiplayer, then the single player will only be better. I've always had a hard time understanding that way of thinking because the single player only lasts you so long. So if you have an amazing multiplayer, I'm sure, yeah, of course, there are a lot of people who do not care about multiplayer and will only play the game for its single player. There are plenty of people I know who fall into that category of only playing games for single player and not playing the multiplayer. But that's the whole problem that I have, and this is something that people fail to understand, is that your preferences and your experiences do not define how other people should experience the game. So yeah, you personally don't give a shit about The Last of Us multiplayer. That's completely fine. But there are a lot of people who did. And if there weren't, then you wouldn't see all the outrage that you saw today surrounding this announcement. So let's talk about, well, first of all, since we do a lot of analysis on this channel, try to explain why certain things happen. Let's delve into why potentially why Naughty Dog made its decision to omit multiplayer. I have a pretty good hunch on why they decided not to do it. Well, it's for one main reason. Okay, so the main reason it probably has to do with the fact that single player is the prime, is the thing that makes people buy the game way more than multiplayer. As amazing as the multiplayer is, yeah, there is more demand for the single player campaign. More people are invested in Ellie, Joel, and those characters, and just the story and the narrative than they are of playing the online experience. And that maybe it's just a lot of people who do not care about multiplayer, period. Other people who just they tried The Last of Us multiplayer and didn't really care for it. Either way, the single player has been the definitive thing that people have known for Naughty Dog. Let's just face it. I mean, the single player is the most relevant piece of any game that Naughty Dog makes. So yeah, getting rid of multiplayer is just, it doesn't really have too much of an effect on their bottom line because yeah, it costs money to allocate resources to develop another part of the game, so that will raise the cost of development. So if the vast majority of people are going to buy the game no matter what you do, whether you have multiplayer or not, you already established The Last of Us as an amazing franchise, right? So the sequel speaks for itself in that sense. You have the same characters that you know and love. They're coming back, and you're going to have a continuation of the amazing story of The Last of Us, and that's all they really need to sell the game, right? They don't really need to talk about the multiplayer and showcase it and to allocate all these resources to a multiplayer mode that a minority of people who buy the game are going to are going to play. And even if there's a good amount of people that actually play the multiplayer, which in the case of The Last of Us, it seemed like there actually were, at the end of the day, I mean, you see a lot. So Broken Games HD, I'm sure a lot of you who watch this channel are familiar with him. In case you're not, he's a gaming YouTuber. He's the host of the Weapon Wheel podcast. So if you're familiar with that podcast, then you would know who he is, definitely. But he's been known as like a huge fan of online multiplayer games. Like he is the biggest advocate for games that focus on multiplayer over single player. He's a big multiplayer guy. He actually posted a whole rant, like a 40-minute rant, on why The Last of Us 2 not having any multiplayer is just like awful, and he was just outraged and he was pissed off, and he did this whole rant. And but there was something he said during that video that kind of got to me, that plays into this greater thing here when it comes to the gaming community. People like to talk the talk, but they will not walk the walk. Meaning, they say all these things, they like to bitch and complain and bitch and complain and continuously bitch and moan over all these things that are happening right now in video games, yet they are the reason why those things are happening. If it wasn't for people like BG, who said that he started a whole petition on change.org to add multiplayer to The Last of Us 2. He started a whole petition, and in that petition, it said, by signing this petition, you agree to the following: that you will boycott The Last of Us, and you will not play the game unless they add multiplayer in it. And then he goes on, he makes a video right after starting that petition and says, of course I plan on buying that game. Of course I'm going to play the game. Like, what? Come again? What? You see the problem I have here? I was talking about that in my last video about the Epic Game Store. I have so many people who complain about the Epic Game Store, yet a good amount of them, I would say a majority of these people who will complain about the Epic Game Store, how it's evil, how it's Chinese spyware, and how it's the worst thing to ever happen, it's the most anti-consumer thing, they got a copy of Borderlands 3 on the PC. And of course, Borderlands 3 on the PC is exclusive to the Epic Game Store. So, that says a lot. Like, these people, and this applies to everything. This is just like a universal human thing. And it's nothing particularly bad about the video game community over anyone else. I mean, you especially see it in politics where people say one thing but then act another way. It's just, it's that one aspect of human nature that I just cannot understand. How people can say one thing and then just do something completely different, and then get mad that things don't go the way that they say they want it to, but yet they keep perpetuating a system that reinforces the shittiness. You know what I'm saying? Like you are not helping. If you keep buying this game, if you care so much about multiplayer, then you should not buy The Last of Us. If you care about it so much, then you should make a statement. And I know some people maybe say, and this is the problem with collective organization, with organizing boycotts, is that it's this mentality that my worth as the individual is nothing, right? I don't have any individual worth. I cannot contribute to making the situation better. If I decide not to buy the game, then what is that going to do? Naughty Dog, me not buying the game isn't going to hurt Naughty Dog necessarily. They'll make $60 less than they would otherwise. But that's the problem that this is the thing that people fail to understand, is that not buying the game is doing something. That you're making a statement, whether it's as small as it may be. You are still making a statement that I am not going to support this. But if you keep complaining, then that is also another action of you saying, you might say that what's going on is wrong, but you're doing something completely different. You're actually perpetuating the bullshit that goes on in video games. And again, this happens with everything else, with politics, with everything. So this isn't just about video, but like that whole thing, really, like this whole thing that happened today with The Last of Us, especially that video that BG made, just really like reinforced that for me. That people, that humans, I guess maybe it's by nature, humans are just are hypocrites, right? They just don't have any consistent values at all. And yeah, that's part of the reason why a lot of these companies just get away with doing whatever the hell they want. So back to Naughty Dog, they're not going to lose that much money by omitting multiplayer, by not having it in the game, because if you have these schmucks like BG that are going to continue to buy the game, even though they keep complaining and complaining on Twitter, it doesn't really hurt their bottom line. It really doesn't. All they care about is if you buy the game or not. That's what they care about more than anything else. Everything else is trivial. You really think they care about, oh, we care about making gamers happy? If they really cared about making you happy and caring about about the gamer, then we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. Now, would we? Okay, so that's why they decide to do it. And it seems like it's going to work. People are going to complain, and they're going to complain. But at the end of the day, nothing's going to really happen. So let me talk about the Naughty Dog's response to this whole controversy about how it's not a big deal. Okay, so we are Naughty Dog. We're working on multiplayer. We're hiring people to work on multiplayer, and they kind of hinted at making a separate game for The Last of Us multiplayer, like make 2 separate games that would potentially be priced at $60 each. So you'd be paying $120 for the single player and the multiplayer. Like, sorry, I don't care how amazing your multiplayer is. I don't want to have to pay 2 separate fees to be able to access both of those, because it's not. Quite frankly, The Last of Us 2 is not worth $60. Spider-Man is not worth $60. The God of War is not worth $60, because you play the game once, it's a linear experience, you get 20 hours or so of it, and then after that, what the hell do you do? I uninstall the game. So I pay $60 for these games, and sure, maybe down the line I might play it again, and over time there may be some replay value, but that immediate replay value of multiplayer, it cannot be matched. And I will say, though, the games that I have the most hours put into are Fallout 4 and Skyrim, which are single-player only experiences. But the difference is that those are not linear games. You have mod support. You have just free reign to do whatever the hell you want. Same thing with Grand Theft Auto. I mean, these are games you could easily put hundreds of hours into. It's very difficult to put those same hours to get the same amount of enjoyment out of The Last of Us. Let's say you may argue that, well, Last of Us, it has better writing and that the story is a little bit better. So, but that to me, that alone does not make a game. I'm sorry. I mean, you have a lot of people who love narrative, who love story-driven game. I love stories, of course I do, but the best game to me is a game that can tell a great story but can also do all these other things. Because at the end of the day, I mean, $60 is a lot for a video game. So you may make the argument that, well, if you do this mathematical analysis in your head, you crunch the numbers, $60 for 20 hours of entertainment is acceptable because you pay $10 to $15 for a 2-hour movie at a movie theater. Well, my counter to that is that I don't go to movie theaters that much myself, so I don't really apply to that whole thing. Most people these days are streaming, which means they're paying like, what, $10, $11, $12 a month. So they're paying the price for a movie ticket to have access to all these different games, to all these different movies, rather, and TV shows and everything. So people are used to getting more for less. So that whole thing of The Last of Us 2 is easily worth $60. Well, that's definitely, that can be debated, because I don't feel like I got my money's worth when it comes to a lot of these games. I know a lot of people may be saying, like, what the hell is wrong with you? These are amazing games. The games that I just mentioned, Spider-Man, God of War, and The Last of Us. Well, The Last of Us 1 had multiplayer. That's the difference. And most of the time that I've put into The Last of Us, most of the time that I put into Uncharted, as amazing as those single-player experiences were, most of my fond memories of those games, looking back, have to do with the multiplayer. First of all, because, yeah, it adds a lot of replayability. It's not linear in the sense that you don't know what's going to happen in one particular game. You can continuously replay the same story over and over again, but you know what's going to happen, and you don't have any control over the outcome. and you can, sure, you can play in a higher difficulty and you get a better challenge. But if challenge is a thing that you're so concerned about, right? If you talk, so all these people that talk about difficulty and having a challenge, there is no greater challenge than being put in a game with other human beings that you don't know how they're going to act and how you're going to take that on, as opposed to an AI where you can get the feel of them over time. Like for example, what are the most notorious difficult games that you think of single player wise? You think of the games from id Software, right? You think of Sekiro, you think of Dark Souls. But the thing is, it's kind of it's more. I will argue that those games are more rhythm based games than actual challenging games. Once you get the rhythm going, you got the game. Sure, it's easier said than done, and it's not an easy thing to do to get that rhythm. But at the end of the day, it's the act of getting used to the mechanics of the game and getting all that and feeling the flow of the game and getting into the rhythm of it, so you can dodge the attacks and you can beat the game. Or so that's essentially the purpose of id Software games, right? The point I'm trying to get at with multiplayer games, there is no more challenging experience than being put in a match with real people that act completely different, and you have no way of predicting exactly how they're going to act. And that's why, in my opinion, people may disagree, and that's fine, I think multiplayer games are the most enriching and rewarding experiences that you can have in video games. I've always been a multiplayer guy. In recent years, ironically, I've been heavily into single player RPGs. But those games also, those games, you get more fulfillment out of those games because you feel like you have control over the experience. You see what I'm saying at here? So with Skyrim, with Fallout, especially when you have mods, you feel like you actually have control over the experience. And that $60, it's you feel like you're part of the world because you are building that world in some way based on the choices you make or certain things that happen in the game. Or with mods, you can literally change the way the world looks, right? In the case of these linear games, I don't know why people are so hyped up about these games. I mean, they all feel the same to me. These are every single PlayStation exclusive. They're all third-person shooting games. Like, come on, enough is enough at some point. At least back with the PS3, first of all, you had better multiplayer games. And again, multiplayer games, in my opinion, are the most fulfilling gaming experiences you could ever have. There's no real... You cannot compare the experience of playing fighting games and racing games and even shooting games against AI to actual real human beings, especially when you have party chat involved, when you're playing with friends. It's the best experience you could ever have in a video game. And there are great single player games. Let me just say, there are plenty of single player games with shitty multiplayer where the multiplayer is just tacked on, and there are plenty of great multiplayer games that have a shitty single player. Call of Duty comes to mind in recent years. In recent years, they've kind of both been shitty, but I can think of certain games where the single player has just been tacked on and the multiplayer has actually been the focus of the game, actually. So that's the reason why I'm so disappointed with not just the thing with Naughty Dog, because that just plays into a greater thing of me just being consistently disappointed with the way things have been going, the way the industry has been the direction the industry has been headed towards, and I feel like I am not getting the fulfillment I have been getting in the past out of video games. This is a hobby that I've loved for years upon years, and now I'm just losing that love. Red Dead Redemption 2. This is the last new game that I ever bought. This is the last time that I bought a game new. Red Dead Redemption 2. So almost a year since I actually bought a new game, because these new games are trash. They're not worth the $60. Red Dead Redemption 2 has an amazing single player. You got the free roaming. You got all that. And you have a multiplayer. See what I'm getting at here? You can't tell me that The Last of Us is has objectively better storytelling and better shooting mechanics and better gameplay than Red Dead Redemption. You can't. And then Red Dead Redemption also has that multiplayer in it. You see what I'm getting at here? I'm not like you other people who are just so fixated on getting the newest games and buying the games new, even if you're getting ripped off for them. Even if you're not really getting your money's worth, just being able to get the game as soon as possible, as early as possible. I just don't understand the point when you have so many other games that you potentially never played before that that are cheaper because they're old and they actually offer more experiences for you, better experiences. For me personally, I've been playing some games. I haven't been playing new games. This is the last new game I bought. But what are the games I've been actually buying and playing as of late? They're games that are at least 10 years old that I haven't gotten around to play before, like Dragon Age, Mass Effect. These are enriching single-player experiences, but they're amazing single-player experiences that I feel like I'm getting a lot out of and has plenty of replay value compared to The Last of Us, where it's a more linear, streamlined experience. And what hurts the most is that what I loved about Naughty Dog so much is that they were like the balance between the two. You had an amazing single-player experience and an amazing multiplayer experience. There aren't too many developers that could say that they could do both. But Naughty Dog was consistently that studio that was really what they could do. If you dedicate enough resources to both single player and multiplayer, that it doesn't diminish the quality of one or the other. So this whole notion that omitting multiplayer is going to make the single player better, again, you sound like a mindless fanboy that doesn't actually know like how things actually work in the real world. This is a financial decision more than anything else. It's a way to cut costs, and that's all it is at the end of the day. If you have suckers that are going to pay $60 for a standalone multiplayer only game, then yeah, of course they're going to do it. I'm not going to be one of those people. Even if they do decide to have a standalone multiplayer game, I'm not going to support that. Is that really the direction you want to be headed in, where instead of a game with multiple different modes, they're selling each mode as individual games and you have to pay individual prices, $60 for each of those experiences? Is that really the future you want to head towards, and you think that's a great thing just because Naughty Dog's doing it? And we don't even know if that's where they're headed, but that's the rumor that we've been getting, that's the thing that they're doing, and that they're committed to multiplayer. Yeah, I don't know. It's just this is why I honestly have just lost my interest in video games. Like why I haven't been posting too many videos on this channel, for example. Because if I lose interest in playing games, why the hell am I going to talk about them? And I'm just sick and tired of this whole YouTube circle jerk of people, making money about complaining about certain things and doing nothing to actually change the entire system and the entire dynamic, right? And that's what pisses me off so much, is that everyone on here, like so many people on here, are just total hypocrites. So why should you take their word at face value? Like, why should you care about what they say if they don't mean a damn thing that they say? It's just so frustrating to me. I don't understand why, like, how people are just... I mean, I kind of get why people are just okay with it, because it's a lot more work to actually take action. And of course you had people that are just like, well, I don't play multiplayer, so my experience can apply to you. Because if I don't like multiplayer, then you shouldn't like multiplayer either. Then it shouldn't matter to you either. Like, screw you, man. Screw you. Like, these people are just so irritating in the video game community, definitely. But it's not really, it's more of a human nature thing, really, than anything else. You see it everywhere. It's not just exclusive to the video game community. I mean, everyone's a hypocrite in some way, shape, or form. So I'm not gonna just single out the gaming community. It's you especially see that in politics, where people say one thing and do the completely opposite thing. So, but it's still a problem, because like, how can you take these people by their words? But yeah, I can't buy this game. I can't support this game. Maybe I'll play the game if it's in a bargain bin. If I can get it used cheap, they're not getting my money, so why should I care? It's not worth $60. No way. But that's just my whole thing. This whole rant. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about The Last of Us 2 having no multiplayer, and maybe if you think I'm overreacting and that multiplayer doesn't really matter, and that somehow getting rid of multiplayer is going to make the single player experience better, because we totally saw that with the Order 1886, right? Yeah, it's just it's disappointing. And that's what this entire gaming generation, I felt nothing but disappointment. And I'm starting to, over time, just lose interest in video games more and more and more as time goes on. And just moving on to other things. So, anyway, thanks for watching, and peace out.